Hello bookworms! Today I'm here to do a list of my top 10 fantasy and sci-fi reads of 2016. So I made this list. I always look at all of the books that I read like throughout the year, and that's how I compile the list, because I keep track of like what I read month per month. I've been doing that since like the year 2010, I think. I like made this list a little while ago, and then I was looking at it again today and I'm like, why isn't Passenger or Truthwitch on this list? And I was like getting so confused, and then I realized that I read arcs of them in 2015, so that's why they're not on this list, which makes more sense because I really loved those books. But anyway, I'm gonna get into the top 10 that I read this year in 2016. So number 10 on my list is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This falls into more of like the sci-fi type category. So it follows the story of Victor Vale and his college roommate Eli and their arch nemesis. So Eli decides to do a project about EOs, which are extra extraordinaries, and he has an idea of how EOs are potentially formed, and it's through near-death experiences. So him and Victor do these experiments. Both of them end up becoming EOs, and Victor is definitely seen as the villain of this story, but as you read, you will see the lines of hero and villain like very much blurred. So it's really, really interesting. You're reading from Victor's perspective and you get much more about his side of the story than Eli's side of the story. And it's just so well written, and it's so fast paced, and it's so interesting to just see the progression of how these two college kids went from like finding out who they are to becoming the hero slash villain of this story, both of them. It's really up to you to decide like who you think is more of the villain and who you think is more of the hero. Next on my list is Pivot Point by Casey West. This follows a girl named Addison who has the ability to see into the future. She calls it like searching. So whenever she's faced with a decision, she can see a certain amount of time into the future how her decision will play out, and then she can kind of make the best decision based on those two possible futures. So this book was really interesting because in the beginning of the book, her parents tell her that they're going to be getting divorced, and they give her the opportunity to either stay with her mother and live in this city where everyone there has different abilities, and she's never lived outside of that for her whole life, or she can go and live with her dad in the normal world and kind of acclimate to like regular people. So it's really interesting, and the story, like each chapter switches between perspectives. So it's a linear story, and you get to see like what would happen at her mom's and what would happen at her dad's like simultaneously through like the one chapter to the next chapter. And it's just very exciting, and it all leads up to this one thing, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's very well written. It reads very much like a contemporary despite the sci-fi aspect to it, and I really, really loved it. And yeah, definitely recommend this one. Number 8 on my list is The Architect of Song by A.G. Howard. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it is so beautifully written. It follows a main character named Juliet, and Juliet is deaf, so she cannot hear anything, which is really interesting because this whole story is so lyrical and so beautiful. So it's like ironic that she can't hear anything, but then this story is just like I said, so lyrical. But it follows her, and her mother has passed away, and I don't know if she necessarily has enough money to keep her estate, but there is a man named Lord Thornton who becomes very interested in buying her property. She one day is like visiting this grave, and she sees this beautiful flower, and she ends up taking the flower from this grave. Like, she doesn't know what possesses her to do it, but she does. And when she does, she takes a petal off of the flower, and then she's able to see a ghost. So then her and this ghost are working to try to figure out this mystery. They're trying to save her estate, and she's able to hear the ghost, and the ghost is able to hear her, and she's able to like see him even though no one else can. So it's really interesting that she has this person that she can communicate with, that can totally hear, like that she can totally hear and that can totally hear her, but obviously he can't touch anything because he's a ghost. And it's just really really fascinating, and there are twists at every moment. Like, once you think you have the story figured out, you're probably wrong. And even when they explain it to you and you're like, oh, okay, that's what's going on, that's usually not what's going on. There's usually like even more to the story. So it was just really, really good. I really fell in love with this one. I think it's one of the best Beauty and the Beast retellings that I have ever read. And I'm really, really glad that I got to it. Next on my list is The Thousandth Floor by Katharine McGee. It follows different perspectives of all of these people who live in a building that encompasses like all of Manhattan. It's a 1,000th floor building, and the people who are the most wealthy live toward the top of the building, and then the people that are less fortunate live toward the bottom. So it follows a group of teenagers, obviously, and this book is pitched as Gossip Girl meets Pretty Little Liars, and it's really, really good. It's full of drama. It's a really, really fun read. And I think what I liked the most about it was just seeing this futuristic like glimpse of Manhattan and just all of this technology that I would never even think of that came to like fruition in here. It was so cool. Like the author just had such interesting ideas of the future. So the book takes place in 2118, so it's like very far in the future, and it's really like the different technology that made this book one of my favorites of the year. I thought that it was really good. They're also the beginning of the book, so it starts with one of the characters falling to their death off of the 1,000th floor of this building, but you don't know who it is, and then the entire book is leading up to that moment, and you find out which character it was that takes the plunge. So, and whether it was an accident or on purpose or whatever was going on. So it's just really interesting. I enjoyed it like way more than I was expecting to. Like I had high hopes for it, but I really, really loved it. Next on my list is A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in the An Ember in the Ashes series, because I believe it's gonna be 4 books now. Sadly, the third book got pushed back to like 2018, which just like breaks my heart because I really want to know what else is gonna happen. But if it means that the story will be better because she'll have more time to write it, then I guess I can understand that. But I can't say too much about this because it is the second book in the series, so I obviously don't want to spoil the first one. So it's like a fantasy novel, and it takes place in a world that is very similar to like Athens and Sparta. There's a very like militial sector of this world, and there is like one for like kind of normal people, and there are many enslaved people. So it's really, 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 really interesting. I actually enjoyed the second book more than I enjoyed the first book, because we got some answers about some other things. There were definitely some twists in here, and I loved them. Like, I thought it was so well done. And one of my favorite aspects of this book is that there was a third perspective that was added into the story, and it happened to be one of my favorite characters from the first book. So I really, really enjoyed that, and I'm absolutely like, I cannot wait to find out what's going to happen next with these characters because I'm just so invested. Next on my list is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series. I also did read the 5th book this year, Empire of Storms, but I really loved Queen of Shadows like the best of any of the books so far, and I read this one this year. I read it in August. It was like the last book that I read in August because I wanted to be caught up for Empire of Storms, and I didn't think that I was going to read that one right away since like I waited a year to read this one, but with that ending, I had to, and I ended up reading that one too. But I particularly liked this book because of the way that one of the characters was like more fully developed in it. Again, this is the 4th book, so I can't really give you too much of a synopsis here because I don't want to ruin anything. But I mean, I think everyone knows that Throne of Glass is the story of a girl named Selena who's an assassin, and there is a lot of stuff going on. The game kind of totally changes. Different characters that you maybe loved, you could end up hating. Different characters that you hated, you might end up loving. So Sarah J. Maas like really just like plays with your emotions, and really like you just don't know what to expect, which made this very exciting. And Manon is just my favorite character in this series. She was introduced in the 3rd book in Heir of Fire, and I was really unsure of her then, but toward the end I was like, okay, I like this, I like her. And then in this one I was just like, I don't even care what's going on with anyone else. I literally only want her story right now because she's just the most fascinating character in this book. She's such a strong female. She's like such a badass. So awesome. I love her so much. So she's really what made this book for me, and I just really, really love this one, and I cannot wait for the 6th and final book next year, even though I feel like I should just expect heartbreak because Sarah J. Maas. Number 4 on my list is a series ender, and that is Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. This is the third and final book in the Infernal Devices trilogy, and holy cow, this was incredible. Like, I never expected to love a Cassandra Clare book so much, but I fell so in love with the Infernal Devices, and this book just like wrapped everything up so perfectly. My heart was torn in two in the second book, and I was like, I don't even know how there could be an ending that I could like, because I like so many of these people and someone's gonna get hurt and it's gonna kill me. But she managed to like make everything so perfect, and so like it was the only ending, and it was just so good, and I just had so much emotion and so many feelings for these characters, and I just love Will Herondale so much, and I totally get why everyone is obsessed with him, because I am too. And I also love Jem. Jem is like amazing as well, and Tessa is such a cool character also. Like, the three of them were just, and also like Charlotte and Henry, who run the Institute, they are wow. Like, I seriously love everyone in this series. I was so pleased and so glad that I gave this a chance despite not loving the Mortal Instruments as much as other people. Like, oh my god, obsessed with this series. Number 3 on my list is The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. This is another series ender, so again, I can't give you too much information about it, but I can tell you that The Raven Cycle is by far one of my favorite young adult series that is currently like existing. I just loved it so much. I love the group of friends, all of the Raven boys and Blue. I think that their friendship is, it just feels so real. You can just tell, like, they just ooze with how much they care about one another, and it's so like endearing. They're constantly like thinking about one another and like making decisions with their friends in mind, and like they put so much thought into like making sure that everything is the best for the rest of the people in their life. Like, I've never seen such a close-knit group of friends, because especially in high school, I feel like there are a lot of people that can tend to make more selfish decisions, and that is just not the case with these characters. They are like, they're all so in love with each other, and it's so great. And then just like the total like overall atmosphere of the book, it's very like spooky and creepy, and it takes place in like a paranormal type world, but it feels so very similar to our own and so very believable that I just fell in love with the series from the first page. It just was so great, and I thought that this was a really great conclusion. I totally want to reread the series because I seriously just like adore everything about it. It's just, oh, it's just so good. And I'm so happy that Maggie Stiefvater is going to be writing a Ronin-centric trilogy, because he was one of my least favorite characters in the first book, and then he quickly became one of the most interesting and complex people, and I just need more Raven boys in my life in any way that I can get them. Number 2 on my list is yet another series ender, and that is Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This book was so good. I did not love Six of Crows the way that other people loved Six of Crows, but I did enjoy it. And then I read Crooked Kingdom, and I fell so deeply in love with these characters. I love Jesper and Wylan, and I just want them to be together forever. Like, they are such a huge OTP for me now. Like, oh, I love them. But seriously, like, this just wrapped everything up so well. I did a full review of this book, and I will leave a link to that video down below if you want to watch it. The beginning is non-spoilery, and then the ending is very spoilery because I had so very many feelings. But this was just like, oh, it was just so good. So if you have not yet read this duology, I cannot recommend it enough. Oh my god, just Leigh Bardugo did amazing things with this story, with these characters. I just love this group. Like, they're so great. And then finally, the number 1 fantasy book of the year, in my opinion, which I'm sure all of you can see coming, especially since it hasn't been on the list yet thus far, is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy, or whatever it is now, since they announced that there's going to be more books, but I think they're going to be companion books, but I'll take whatever I can get because this world is amazing. But it follows Feyre after the fallout of the first book, and it chronicles her relationship with those characters going forward, and just Faysand is all that I can say. This one is very loosely based on Hades and Persephone, and it's so great. I can't wait to reread this. Like, this is just seriously one of my favorite books of the year. It was a roller coaster ride of emotion. I was so happy, so sad, so happy again, so shocked. Everything about it, I was just like, oh, I love it. I just love this book so much. Me, Cassie, and Melissa read this for our Spines with Wines book club in probably May, since that's when it came out. So I'll leave a link to that down below if you want to see like real in-depth thoughts and feelings, because that was a really, really good live show. Just because all three of us like were so obsessed with this and still are so obsessed with it because it's amazing. I can't even imagine how it's going to conclude next year in A Court of Wings and Ruin, but I am all in. Like, my heart is all in this series, and I love it so, so much. So those are my top 10 fantasy / sci-fi reads of the year. I didn't realize how many series enders were going to be in this video. So now I'm like really curious about what is going to be like the next things that we'll all be into, because in 2017, hopefully, we'll be getting some new series to replace the ones that have like unfortunately ended. I really, really think I had such a great reading year between these ones and between the contemporary reads. That video, I also did a video about the 10 best contemporary reads that I had of the year, so I will leave a link to that down below. I didn't say it at the beginning of the video because I forgot, but these are the top 10 fantasy / sci-fi books that I read in 2016. They weren't necessarily published in 2016, but they're the ones that I read throughout the year. So I really love all of these. Let me know if you love any of these as much as I do. If you have a different ranking for any of the ones that I included in the video, or if you think that there are any books that I might have missed out on this year that I should definitely like make a priority in 2017. So that's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon with a new one. Bye!